Hi everyone, this is Flavia and thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I will be showing you all of the note cards that I created featuring some of Spellbinder's August 2025 clubs. This month's clubs are simply amazing, and that is saying a lot for a person who is just crazy about Christmas. Last month's club's theme was all about the holidays, and when I just thought it couldn't get any better, August happened. These are simply amazing and I just can't wait to create more note cards featuring these sets. So without further ado, here are all of the note cards that I created with some of the Spellbinder's August 2025 clubs, and I hope this video inspires you to get creative as well. So let's begin with this first one that has a purple envelope. I will begin by giving you a closer look at each one of the note cards and then show you the sets that I used to create them. This one has a pocket-shaped envelope that I made by using the Stampendo's A2 gift card holder die set, which is not part of the Spellbinder subscription clubs. And on the flap of the envelope, I stamped the sentiment, "Let your story unfold," using some of the club kits that I will show you in a minute. Inside this custom envelope, we have an A2 size note card that is top folding and can stand nicely on display. To make this note card, I used the Spellbinder's embossing folder to dry emboss this panel that has a school of very cute fish and lots of waves, and it also has a sentiment banner that reads "Drift and Dream." And in the center of my note card, we have a die-cut boat that I cut out from purple cardstock and used DMC floss to do some stitching. To die cut this piece, I used the Spellbinder's August 2025 Stitching Die Club. So let me set this note card aside so I can show you the sets that I used to make it. Let's begin with the embossing folder that I used to dry emboss my panel, which is this one. This one is named Underwater Watts and it was released as the Spellbinder's August 2025 3D embossing folder of the month. This folder is pretty large. It actually measures 5.5 inches wide by 8.5 inches tall, which is great, allowing us to create note cards of many different sizes. With this month's folder, we can dry emboss a beautiful underwater scene with a school of very cute fish and lots of waves and bubbles, as we can see here. Then, to die cut all of the needed pieces to make this note card, I actually used the Spellbinder's Stitching Die of the month for August 2025, and it is named Hand Folded Stitch. With this set, we have lots of metal plates that we can use to cut out pieces to make a paper boat, which are these plates right over here. And as we can see here, some of these plates will cut out tiny holes on the paper that we can use to do some stitching, which is what I did right here for this note card. We also get a couple of sentiment banners right here. We have one that reads Drift and Dream, which is what I used for this note card. Then we have another banner that reads Folded with Love, and a third one that reads Hand Folded Hugs, which is just perfect for this scene. Then we have a couple of other plates over here to finish creating your boat, as well as this long one right here that we can use to create the waves for our scene. So I did use this plate to cut out my dry embossed panel. Actually, I did use this wavy border to die cut this panel before using the dry embossed folder to add texture to this panel. If you dry emboss it first and then die cut it, you will eliminate most of this nice texture once you run it through your die cutting machine. So it is always recommended to die cut whatever you need to die cut and only then add texture with the dry embossing folder. Regarding the cardstock, this is all by Spellbinders. I used 2 different shades of blue cardstock and 2 different shades of purple cardstock. And I also used a bright green cardstock to cut out some of these pieces, and for some sparkle I used Spellbinder's Mirror Silver cardstock to cut out the sentiment banner. So here is a closer look at the first note card that I created with some of Spellbinder's August 2025 clubs. By the way, I did go over the die cut heart right here with a shimmer pen to add some sparkle, and inside the note card it is blank. So here is the second note card that I really want to show you. For this one, I chose a bright yellow envelope to match the note card that goes inside, and to decorate the flap of my envelope, I added a thin cardstock strip, and I did stamp the sentiment Happy Birthday using an older set. Inside we have this very bright and fun note card that is A2 size top folding, and inside I did add a fun surprise for the recipient. Regarding the front of this note card, I began by dry embossing my panel using an older set by Spellbinders, which is this one. This is named Summertime Waves. To dry emboss this panel, I actually cut out 2 different colors of cardstock, and I did tape them in the back together before I ran it through my die cutting machine to dry emboss this panel with this folder. Then I used strong liquid glue to glue these 2 colors panel to my note card. Regarding the die cut elements, to cut out all of these pieces, I actually used 2 different sets. So let me move this out of the way so I can show you the 2 sets. So first, I cut out these 2 fish using all of these plates included in this die set, released as a bonus item for those who were subscribed to the Spellbinders Deluxe Kabuto Club Kit. So with this month's bonus item, we get a die set with 5 metal plates that we can use to cut out pieces to make 2 different types of fish, which are these 2 that I added to my note card. I also used Spellbinders cardstock to cut out all of these pieces. Then, to cut out the pieces to create this plastic bag with water inside, I used a different set, which is this one, also released as August 2025 Club Kit. So this is the Spellbinders large die of the month for August 2025, and this one is named Splash Tails. These are the plates that I used over here to cut out the pieces to make this plastic bag with water. However, aside from this, we also have a few other amazing plates that we can use to create a sand castle, which are these plates over here. We also have a plate to cut out a sentiment banner that reads "Make a Splash." It's upside down. Then right here we have the die plates needed to create these adorable cuties. We also have plates down here to cut out different types of seaweed and a flower plant. We also have these plates over here to create a different type of fish, different from these 2. So we have lots of fish options with the Spellbinders August clubs. Then right here we have this plate that cuts 3 different pieces that we are supposed to glue together to create a pearl shell, which is pretty nice. And I forgot to mention that we also have this plate right here that cuts 3 different pieces that we can use as rocks to create an underwater scene. So this is the Spellbinders August 2025 large die of the month. Regarding the sentiment Sending a Splash of Happy, to stamp and die cut this sentiment, I did use the Spellbinders Paper Splash Clear Stamp and Die of the Month for August 2025. With this set, we have this stamp with 2 large images that we can stamp to create really fun note cards. I did not use these large stamps this month, but I do think that they are amazing. I actually meant to stamp them onto the flap of my envelopes to decorate it, but I completely forgot. Aside from these 2 images, we also have amazing sentiments that go really well with this month's theme, such as this one that I use for my note card, as well as It's Okay to Float a While, Sending Joy on Paper Sails, Float Bodily into a New Year, Make a Splash, It's Your Day, We Are in This Together, Let Your Story Unfold, which goes really well with the stitching die of the month. Then we have Made by Hand, Meant for You, and May Your Day Go Swimmingly. And we also have the coordinating die plates to cut out these 2 large images. And here we have 2 sizes of banner die plates. So that's what I used to stamp and cut out this sentiment banner. And before I forget, if we do look closely, I did hot foil this section just to add some sparkle to what is supposed to be the water inside the plastic bag. To do so, I did use the Spellbinders Glimmer of the Month, which is this set right here. So the Spellbinders August 2025 Glimmer of the Month is named Beneath the Bubbles, And aside from this hot foil set, we also get a foil roll, and this month's foil is in the color Speckled Prism, which is this one right here. This is actually one of my favorite foils. It is simply gorgeous and it adds a lot of sparkle. And it actually goes really well with this month's theme. However, since I wanted a subtle effect, instead of using this foil, I switched to Spellbinder's Opal Foil, which is a very also gorgeous foil, but very subtle, and it adds just enough interest without taking too much away from the focal point of the note card. So here is a closer look at my second note card creating with some of Spellbinder's August 2025 clubs. And here is the matching envelope. Again, all of these beautiful colors of cardstock are by Spellbinders, and I will make sure to list everything in the description box down below in case you are interested. So let me now move all of this out of the way so I can show you my third note card created with some of these clubs. Again, I made my own pocket shape envelope, and I did stamp the sentiment Happy Birthday, and I added 2 thin cardstock strips to the flap of my envelopes. Even though all of my note cards are made from Spellbinders cardstock because I like it so much, I think the colors are amazing and the quality is outstanding. Spellbinders cardstock are just perfect not only for die cutting but also for hot foiling, and that is why I choose Spellbinders cardstock to make most of my note cards. However, to make my own custom envelopes, I like to switch to a different type of cardstock that is a little bit lighter. Usually I use 65 pounds cardstock to cut out the pieces to make my own envelopes, because I feel like it is not so thick that will make it look bulky, and at the same time it is not so thin that will not protect the note card that will go inside. So I highly recommend 65 pounds cardstock to cut out pieces to make your custom envelopes. And I usually buy it from Michael's Craft Store. I like using their brand, the Recollections cardstock, because you can buy in bulk at their website and sometimes they run really nice sales. So I highly recommend their lighter weight cardstock for creating your custom envelopes. So moving on to the note card, here we have an arched shaped note card that can nicely stand on display, which is the goal for all of the note cards that I make. This one has a lot of sparkle, as we can see here, and a few different types of fish. So here is a closer look at the note card before I explain to you how I created this one. So to cut out this arched shaped note card, I actually used an older set by Spellbinders. Let me find it in here. This one. I have actually shown you this set in my previous videos. I use this one a lot and it is one of my favorite sets because I love creating arched shaped note cards. This one is the Essential Arches die set and it comes with 16 die cutting plates to cut out different sizes of arched panels. So to create my card base, I used the largest die plate included in the set and I placed it over an A7 size note card, making sure to offset one side so it wouldn't cut at all on this one side, allowing me to end up with these 2 connected pieces that I can now use as a card base. Then I used maybe the second, Then I used the second biggest plate in this set to cut out these 2 panels that I glued inside my note card to make it feel heavier. To stamp the sentiment wishing you a day that is special in every way, I used an older set. I believe it is by Stampendous, but available at Spellbinders website. And I added a few die cut fish inside this note card to match the scene at the front. Regarding the front of this note card, I began by die cutting a large arched shape panel using the largest plate included in this set, and then I proceed to add lots of sparkle to this panel with the Spellbinders Hot Foil Club Kit. So I did use this large plate right here to do the hot foiling technique. This plate is actually big enough to cover the entire front of an A2 size note card. And I did use the Speckled Prism foil, which is included in the Spellbinders August 2025 Glimmer Club. Then to cut out all of these fish, I actually used two different sets. I did use these 3 plates included in the Spellbinders large die of the month to cut out these 2 large ones, and I did add googly eyes just for fun. Regarding the smaller fish, I did use a couple of plates included in the Spellbinders small die of the month that I will give you a closer look in a minute. This is also an outstanding set, by the way. And I used the sentiment plate included in the Spellbinders Glimmer of the month. It also comes with the die plates, the coordinating die plates to cut out the sentiment, which is what I did for this note card. So here we actually have 2 options for hot foiling the sentiment. One is the one that I used, Hope Your Day Shimmers, and we also have a smaller one that reads Popping By to Say Hi. So here is another closer look at the 3rd note card created with this month's clubs. Here we have another A2 size note card. For this one, I chose a craft collar envelope that I purchased from Amazon, and I did decorate the flap of my envelope with some die cuts, and I stamped the sentiment Happy Birthday onto the flap of this envelope. Inside, oh my goodness, I had forgotten, this is my favorite. I actually cannot stop looking at it. I just love all of the details. At first, I was wondering if this was just too much because I did just too many techniques to the background. But to be honest, I do love all of the texture and all of the sparkle. So this is an A2 size note card. Inside, I decided to stamp the sentiment Wishing You a Day that is special in every way using an older stamp set. And I did stamp Happy Birthday onto the flap of the envelope just to turn this note card into a birthday note card. Let's begin with the background. As we can see here, I did do 2 different techniques onto my background panel. I began by hot foiling a blue panel that measures 5.5 inches tall by 4.25 inches wide. To do so, I used the Spellbinder Glimmer Club for August 2025. Then, aside from the sparkle, I also wanted to add some texture. So after hot foiling, I dry embossed my hot foiled panel with the Spellbinders 3D embossing folder for this month. After that, I glued my panel to my note card, my white note card, and I proceed to die cutting these pieces. So to cut out all of these pieces, I did use this large die set that I showed you earlier. So again, with this set, we have the mermaid pieces that I used to create this cutie over here. So we have different plates that we can use to cut out all of the needed pieces from different colors of cardstock. So here we have the body, then we have this plate over here to cut out her hair, then her tail. I still haven't figured out what this one is for, but right over here with this tiny plate, we can cut out the pieces to create her top that I cut from glitter cardstock and the belt that is over here. And to make her even more adorable, I decided to add flat back rhinestones so she can have a pair of earrings. Then I decided to cut out 2 sandcastles using these plates over here from 2 different shades of Spellbinders brown cardstock. I did use this die plate to cut out the sentiment banner Make a Splash, and I did go over this sentiment banner with a shimmer pen for some added sparkle. I also used, I did use a different set to cut out these 2 pieces, which is included in the Spellbinders small die of the month, which are these 2 plates over here. Actually, these 2 plates over here that cuts 1, 2, 3 different pieces that we can stack them up. So I placed 1 on each side. And last but not least, I did use this plate over here to cut out a white shell with a flat back pearl that I glued on top. I actually got this from Amazon and I think it was just perfect. However, if you don't have anything similar to this, any pearl flat back beads, you can go ahead and just use the piece that we can cut out with this die plate. So here is another closer look. Oh, by the way, to cut out the seaweed and this flower plant, I used these plates over here included in the large die of the month. So here is a closer look at one of my favorites note card created with August 2025 club kits. And here we have another note card featuring a craft collar envelope. Usually when I don't have the time to make my own custom envelope and I just don't have the perfect color to match the note card that will go inside, I tend to grab a craft color envelope. I just think it looks really cool and goes well with any color of note card. And inside this craft color envelope, we have a blue note card created with a couple of the Spellbinders August 2025 clubs. This is also an A2 size note card, and inside I just added a couple of die cut corals. I actually only die cut one piece and cut it in half and added one half to the bottom right corner of the note card and the other half to the top right corner of the note card. Regarding the front of my note card, here is a closer look. It is a little bit more modest than the previous one, which is just crazy, has a lot of stuff. This one is a little bit cleaner and I do like the simplicity of this one as well. Regarding the background, I did use the 3D embossing folder for this month, and I did cut this panel from Spellbinders cardstock in the color Malibu. However, I did add some shading to the bottom half of this note card with a dirty ink blending brush that had some blue ink. Regarding the sentiment, I decided to hot foil "Hope your day is as relaxing as a walk on the beach" using an older set by Spellbinders, and if it is available, I'll make sure to list it in the description box down below. Then I used the coordinating die plate to cut it out. Then to create a small scene for this note card, I used this large plate to cut out a metallic silver coral, and on top I added two different colors of coral shell. To cut out this one, I used Spellbinders cardstock in the color Dune, and I did use an older shimmery white cardstock, I believe it's by Recollections, to cut out this one. And on top of each one of these shells, I added a flat back pearl, which I think was a very nice touch. So here is the note card with the matching envelope, and to stamp the sentiment, sending a splash of happy onto the flap of this envelope, I did use this stamp set that I showed you earlier, released as the Spellbinders Clear Stamp and Die of the Month for August 2025. So let's move this one aside so I can show you the next two actually. Here I have two note cards that have a very similar background because I used the Spellbinders Stencil of the Month, which is this set. So let me show you the set before I show you the note cards. This is a layering stencil set that comes with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 layers. So here are the different layers that we get. And on the bottom right corner of each stencil, we have the numbers indicating the order we should follow. Actually, some of them are on the bottom right and some numbers are on the bottom left corner of each layer. So these numbers are indicating the order that we should follow when stenciling these panels. So with this set, we can create a beautiful underwater scene, and since this is a layering stencil, we will be able to easily add different colors to different sections of the panel, which is so much fun. So let me move this one out of the way. And here are the two note cards that I created using not only the stencil set that I just showed you, but also the Spellbinders Small Die of the Month. So for this one, on my right, we have a note card with the sentiment "We are in this together." Inside of the note card, I did that same trick. I cut out one coral piece from Spellbinders Mirror Gold cardstock. I cut it in half and adhere one half to each side of this note card. At the front panel, aside from the stenciled background, I did add a couple of die cut pieces using the Spellbinders Small Die of the Month that I will show you in a minute. Then right here on my left, we have a similar note card featuring the stenciled panel, a hot foiled sentiment that reads "Hope your day shimmers" that I created with the Spellbinders Glimmer of the Month, and I did add two divers as well as onto this one, along with some die cut fish and die cut bubbles for some added dimension. So we have the stenciled bubbles and the die-cut bubbles. So as I mentioned before, to cut out the pieces, I used the Spellbinders Small Die of the Month, which is this wonderful set. So with this set, we have a couple plates over here to cut out different types of corals. We also have some plates over here to cut out different types of fish, very small fish. We also have these plates down here on the bottom left corner that we can use to cut out different pieces to glue together to create two divers with the masks over here. Then we have the tiny plates to cut out the hands. We have these plates over here to cut out the flippers, and these odd shaped plates over here to cut out the pieces to use as the diver's oxygen tanks. And here is the plate that I used to cut out the small and large bubbles added to each one of these note cards. So here is a closer look at both of the note cards, and to add some sparkle to each one of these die cut bubbles, I did go over them with a shimmer pen. By the way, before I forget, to stencil this panel, I did sew over a piece of white shimmery cardstock, and I did go around the edges with a dirty ink blending brush that had some blue leftover ink on it. However, for this one, I did stencil the background over Spellbinders cardstock in the color Sage, and because I wanted to add some sparkle to the background, I decided to spray over this stenciled panel with, I believe it was this shimmer spray. And because I had sprayed too much of this and made my panel really wet, and I couldn't find my heating gun quick enough to set this panel, the ink from the stenciled technique started moving around, and that is why this one is not as sharp. The stencil images are not as sharp as this one. So even though it was an accident, I actually like the end result, and I might do it on purpose next time. So these are the two note cards that I created featuring the Spellbinders August 2025 stencil of the month. So moving on to the last note card, and believe me, I only stopped creating with these sets because I was running out of time. This month's clubs are simply outstanding, and I do hope you're enjoying this video. So for this last one, I made my own pocket-shaped envelope with 65 pounds cardstock. I stamped the sentiment Happy Birthday. I added a purple cardstock strip and a purple fish on the left side, and inside we have another mermaid note card. So this is an A2 size top folding note card, and it has this really fun window that gives the impression that the smaller panel is floating, but that is thanks to the piece of acetate that I sandwiched between two layers of cardstock. So inside this note card, we have this smaller arched panel where we can write a special message that will be hidden in the back of this other panel at the front of the note card. So to make this note card, I began by hot foiling this beautiful panel using the Spellbinders Prism foil and an older hot foil set, which is this one. It's not so old. This one was released as the June 2025 Spellbinders Glimmer of the Month, and it is named Castaway. This is an amazing set as well, perfect to cover the entire front of an A2 size note card, and it is also perfect to do the hot foiling technique, as I mentioned in the video that I recorded for the Spellbinders June 2025 club kits. So I began by using this plate to hot foil a panel that measures 5¼ inches tall by 4 inches wide, and then after hot foiling, I did use one large plate to cut out a large window from my foil panel. After that, I used a smaller plate to cut out a smaller arched panel from the arched panel that I had just cut out. And I also used the same smaller plate to cut out 2 extra pieces from white cardstock that I did glue inside the note card and in the back of the foiled arched panel to have a surface to adhere this panel and give the impression that this this arched panel is floating inside the note card. Before adding this white panel, I did add a piece of clear acetate. So I used liquid adhesive to adhere a clear acetate, and then on top, to hide the ugly parts, I added a white die cut piece and the arched white panel inside. So the clear acetate is sandwiched between the purple note card and these two white die cut pieces. Then on top of my arched panel at the front of my note card, I die cut another mermaid with red hair and a green tail. It also has some rhinestone earrings. I also die cut a couple of bubbles, and I stamped and die cut the sentiment "Make a Splash, It's Your Day" using the clear stamp and die of the month for August 2025. So these are all of the note cards that I created with the Spellbinders August 2025 clubs, and I hope you enjoyed this video and felt inspired. As always, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope you have an amazing day. Take care and happy crafting!